Hello and welcome to Nightmare Lullabies. As you settle in for the night, slip into over an hour of eerie tales and whispered shadows, laced with soft rain and thunder, crafted to chill you and soothe you into sleep. Now close your eyes, relax, and let the darkness drift you away. And if these nightly whispers draw you in, stay with us for more haunting secrets. Liora Kane adjusted her headset in her Buenos Aires apartment, the humid June air of 2025 seeping through the window as she prepared her latest Unheard Echoes podcast episode. At 34, she'd built a niche following with her deep dives into unsolved mysteries, but recent viewership had dipped, pushing her to find a gripping new case. Her inbox pinged with a message from Mountain Shadow 23, Bavaria, 1922 Kraus family massacre. Tied to Ural Mountains, 1959. Check the archive photo. Her pulse quickened. Bavaria was a name her grandfather, a German immigrant, had whispered about, a tale of a slaughtered family in a remote farmstead. She opened the attachment. A grainy black and white photo of a snow-covered farmhouse, its windows dark, dated March 1922, with 6 figures, parents for children, posed stiffly, their faces blurred. The email continued. They were found dead, no signs of struggle. Soviet files hint at a connection. Start there. Liora searched online, uncovering the Kraus case. Karl and Greta Kraus, their children Hannah, Lucas, Marta, and little Elise, killed in their Bavarian farmstead, Hintertal, on March 31, 1922. Axes were the weapon, no footprints in the snow, the killer unseen. The case closed as unsolved in 1924. A Soviet link seemed far-fetched, but the Ural Mountains rang a bell. Dyatlov Pass, where 9 hikers died mysteriously in 1959, their bodies showing bizarre injuries, radiation traces, and a cover-up rumored. Liora booked a flight to Munich, a 16-hour journey with a layover in Sao Paulo, her mind racing. She landed in Munich on June 10th, rented a car, and drove 3 hours to Hintertal, a quiet village nestled in the Bavarian Alps, its peaks looming under a gray sky. The Kraus farmstead was gone, replaced by a memorial plaque, but the air felt heavy with history. At the local archive, she met her Otto Weber, a stooped historian in his 70s with a thick accent. The Kraus killings were strange, Otto said, adjusting his glasses. No tracks, no motive, local legend says a ghost, but I found this. He handed her a faded letter addressed to Karl Kraus, postmarked Moscow, 1921. Your silence is required. Deliver the package, or else. Liora recorded it, her voice tense. This ties the Krauses to Russia, a secret, maybe a motive. Otto shared a rumor. A Soviet agent visited Hintertal in 1921, asking about a scientific project, and left abruptly. Liora cross-referenced Dyatlov Pass. Hikers found with crushed skulls, tongues missing, radiation on their clothes, the Soviet government blaming an avalanche, files sealed until 1990. The timeline fit: a 1922 massacre, a 1959 expedition, both shrouded in silence. She photographed the letter, uploading a teaser episode, The Bavarian Silence, her voice intrigued. The Kraus family was killed for a Soviet secret, next stop, the Urals. Downloads ticked up, listeners commenting with theories, one from Mountain Shadow 23. Check the Dyatlov files, code word Peak Echo. Liora flew to Ekaterinburg, Russia, a 7-hour flight, the Ural Mountains a jagged expanse as she arrived on June 13th. At the regional archive, she met Dr. Irina Petrova, a stern archivist in her 50s, who reluctantly provided sealed Dyatlov files, declassified in 2019. This Peak Echo. It's nonsense, Irina said, but her eyes flickered. The files detailed the hikers' deaths, a coded note among them. Peak Echo activated, Kraus protocol breached. Liora recorded it, her pulse racing. A direct link, the Kraus name in Soviet records. Irina warned. Some say it was a weapon test, stay careful. That night, Liora stayed in a guest house near the pass, the wind howling outside. She reviewed her recordings, the letter and note aligning. A secret experiment, silenced in Bavaria, tested in the Urals. As she typed, a creak sounded from the hall. She grabbed her recorder, its light on, and peered out. Nothing but shadows. Returning to her room, She found her bag open, the Dyatlov files gone, a note pinned to her pillow. Leave Peak Echo alone or join them. Her scream echoed on tape as the lights flickered. The mountains' silence a warning, the mystery deepening across continents. Liora Kane stood frozen in the doorway of her guest house room near the Ural Mountains, the threatening note. Leave Peak Echo alone or join them. Pinned to her pillow, the Dyatlov files stolen from her bag. The date was June 13, 2025, and the icy wind howled outside, rattling the windows of the Ekaterinburg lodging, its wooden walls creaking under the mountain's weight. Her recorder captured her ragged breaths. June 13, 2025, 11:56 p.m. Someone broke in, took the Dyatlov files. I'm not safe here. She called Dr. Irina Petrova, the archivist who'd provided the files, her voice urgent. Irina, my room's been ransacked. The files are gone. Irina's tone was curt, almost cold. I warned you, Miss Kane. Some secrets are better left buried. Liora locked the door, her heart pounding, and examined the note closer. The handwriting was jagged, the ink smudged, but a faint symbol caught her eye. A triangle with a circle inside, etched in the corner. She photographed it, her mind racing. It wasn't random. It felt deliberate, a mark tied to the mystery. She tried to sleep, but the silence of the mountains was oppressive, every creak a potential threat. At dawn, she packed her remaining belongings, the Kraus letter from Bavaria safe in her bag, its warning. Your silence is required, echoing the note's tone. She drove back to the regional archive, the Ural peaks looming like sentinels, their snow-capped tips a stark reminder of the Dyatlov hiker's fate. Irina greeted her at the archive, her gray hair pulled tight, her eyes narrowing as Liora explained the break-in. I don't know anything about that, Irina said, her voice clipped, but her hands fidgeted with a pen, betraying her nerves. Liora recorded the interaction, her instincts screaming. Irina knew more than she let on. I need another copy of the Dyatlov files, Liora pressed, her tone firm. Irina hesitated, then sighed, retrieving a duplicate set, her movements stiff. The files contained the coded note Liora had memorized. Peak Echo activated, Kraus protocol breached. She thanked Irina, but as she turned to leave, Irina whispered, Be careful, some people here still guard those secrets. Liora drove to a cafe in Ekaterinburg, a small space with steamed windows and the smell of black tea, where she met Sergei Volkov, a local guide in his 40s with a weathered face and a limp from a climbing accident. Dmitri had been recommended by a listener, Mountain Shadow 23, as someone who'd guided expeditions near Dyatlov Pass for decades. I heard your podcast, Dmitri said, sipping his tea, his voice low. My father knew the Dyatlov group. He was a rescuer, found their bodies. He said it wasn't an avalanche, no matter what the Soviets claimed. Liora recorded him, her pulse quickening. What did you think happened? She asked. Dmitri leaned closer, his eyes dark. He heard whispers, strange sounds like a hum, in the mountains that night. Military tests, he thought. And one hiker survived, briefly, Yuri Kovalenko. He spoke of a weapon, then died of exposure. Dmitri handed her a journal, its leather cover cracked, belonging to Yuri, smuggled out by his father before Soviet officials could confiscate it. Yuri wrote this before he died, Dmitri said, his voice heavy. Liora flipped through the pages, her fingers trembling. Entries detailed the hike, the group's excitement, then terror. February 1st, 1959, heard a low hum, felt it in our bones. Tents shook, no wind. Something's out there. The final entry, scrawled in haste. Peak Echo, they're testing it again. Kraus knew. We're not alone. Liora recorded the journal, her voice urgent. Yuri knew about Peak Echo, tied it to Kraus. This is the link I needed. She spent the afternoon decoding the Dyatlov note, using Yuri's journal as a cipher key. The phrase Peak Echo referred to a Soviet experiment, a sound-based weapon designed to incapacitate through infrasound, tested in the Urals, its origins tied to a German scientist, Dr. Hans Weber, who'd worked with Karl Kraus in 1921. The Kraus protocol meant silence. Karl was meant to deliver a component, but failed, leading to his family's massacre. Liora recorded her findings, her voice charged. Peak Echo was a weapon developed in Bavaria, tested in the Urals. It killed the Krauses, then the hikers, decades apart. She uploaded a new episode, The Ural Whisper, detailing the journal and the decoded note, her downloads climbing as listeners commented with theories. some mentioning a Dr. Weber who'd fled to Argentina in the 1940s. That evening, Liora hiked to Dyatlov Pass with Dmitri, the terrain brutal, the snow crunching under her boots, the air thinning as they climbed. The pass was a desolate expanse, marked by a stone memorial for the hikers, the wind carrying an eerie hum that sent shivers down her spine. Dmitri pointed to a ridge, his voice low. "That's where they found Eerie, half-dressed, frozen, his tongue gone. My father said the bodies glowed, like they'd been irradiated." Liora recorded the scene, her breath visible in the cold. June 14, 2025, 5:32 p.m. I'm at Dyatlov Pass. The hum's real, unnatural. This place holds the secret of peak echo. As dusk fell, a shadow moved in the trees, a figure tall, dressed in black, watching them. Liora's heart raced, her recorder capturing her gasp. "Someone's here." Dmitri drew a knife, his voice sharp. "We need to go, now." They ran, the figure pursuing, their boots slipping on ice, the hum growing louder, almost deafening, as if the mountains themselves were alive. They reached Dmitri's truck, speeding away, the figure vanishing into the darkness, but the hum lingered, a haunting echo of the past. Back at the guest house, Liora locked her door, her nerves frayed, and reviewed her recordings, the listener tip about Argentina burning in her mind. Dr. Weber, the scientist behind Peak Echo, had fled there, possibly continuing his work. She prepared to sleep, the journal safe in her bag, when a loud crash echoed from the main room. She grabbed her recorder, its light on, and crept out, her heart pounding. The room was a mess, tables overturned, her laptop open, the Dyatlov files she'd reclaimed scattered, some pages torn. A symbol, the triangle with a circle inside, was carved into the wall, identical to the note on her pillow. Her recorder captured her scream. "They're back, they've ransacked my room, left the same symbol." She called Dmitri, her voice panicked, but the line crackled, static drowning his response, the hum from the mountains echoing through the phone, a chilling reminder that Peak Echo's legacy was far from silent. Liora Kane sat in the ransacked main room of her Ekaterinburg guest house, the carved symbol, a triangle with a circle inside, staring back at her from the wall, an eerie echo of the threatening note left on her pillow. The Dyatlov files she'd reclaimed from Irina Petrova were scattered, some pages torn, her laptop open but untouched, as if the intruder wanted her to know they'd been there. It was June 15, 2025, and the Ural Mountains hum lingered in her ears, a haunting reminder of the chase at Dyatlov Pass, where a shadowy figure had pursued her and Sergei Volkov. Her recorder captured her shaky voice. June 15, 2025, 1:23 a.m. They've been here again, trashed the room, left the same symbol. Peak Echo's legacy is alive, and they want me gone. She called Dmitri, her voice urgent, but the line crackled, static drowning his words, the mountains hum seeping through the phone like a living entity. Liora locked the door, her heart pounding, and gathered her belongings, the Kraus letter from Bavaria and Yuri Kovalenko's journal safe in her bag. The journal's final entry: Peak Echo, they're testing it again. Kraus knew. Confirmed a Soviet sound weapon, developed with German scientist Dr. Hans Weber, who'd worked with Karl Kraus in 1921 before the family's massacre. A listener tip from her podcast, Unheard Echoes, had pointed her to Argentina. Weber had fled there in the 1940s, possibly continuing his work. She booked a flight to Buenos Aires, a 20-hour journey with a layover in Istanbul, her mind racing. Patagonia, where Weber had settled, was her next lead. Liora landed in Buenos Aires on June 17. The city's winter chill a stark contrast to the Urals' biting cold, the air heavy with the scent of grilled meat and exhaust. She rented a car and drove 12 hours to San Carlos de Bariloche, a Patagonian town nestled in the Andes, its wooden chalets and chocolate shops a tourist haven, but its remote outskirts a perfect hiding place for a fugitive scientist. The drive was grueling, the winding roads flanked by snow-dusted peaks and shimmering lakes, the Nahuel Huapi reflecting the gray sky. Liora recorded her journey, her voice a mix of exhaustion and determination. June 18, 2025, 3:47 p.m. I'm in Patagonia, Bariloche, where Dr. Hans Weber disappeared after the war. If Peak Echo continued, it's here. She checked into a small inn on the town's edge, its walls adorned with photos of the Andes, the innkeeper, a stout woman named Rosa, greeting her with a warm smile. You're the podcaster? Rosa asked, her English accented but fluent. I heard your episode, Scary Stuff. Liora nodded, explaining her search for Weber's descendants. Rosa's smile faded, her eyes flickering with unease. The Weber name isn't welcome here, she said, lowering her voice. Hans died in 1970, but his grandson, Matteo Weber, lives near Lago Puello, a recluse. People say he's strange, keeps to himself, works on projects. Be careful, señorita. Liora recorded the tip, her pulse quickening. Matteo Weber, a direct link to Hans, possibly continuing peak echo. The next day, Liora drove to Lago Puello, a 2-hour journey through dense forests and rugged trails. The lake's turquoise waters a stark contrast to the looming peaks. Matteo's cabin was isolated, a ramshackle structure with a tin roof, its windows boarded, a faint hum, like the one at Dyatlov Pass, emanating from within. She knocked, her recorder on, and Matteo answered. A wiry man in his 50s with graying hair and sharp blue eyes, his hands stained with grease. What do you want? He asked, his Spanish clipped, his gaze suspicious. Liora explained her podcast, mentioning Hans Weber and peak echo, watching his reaction. Matteo's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. My grandfather's work is none of your business, he snapped, but his voice wavered, betraying fear. Liora pressed, her tone calm but firm. Hans developed a sound weapon, peak echo, tested in the Urals, tied to the Kraus massacre in 1922. Did he continue it here? Matteo hesitated, his hands clenching, then sighed, stepping aside. Come in, he said, his voice low. But you're walking into something bigger than you know. Inside, the cabin was a workshop. Oscilloscopes, wires, and blueprints cluttered the space, the hum louder, vibrating in her chest. Matteo showed her a box of Hans's letters, yellowed and brittle, dated 1946 to 1965. One addressed to a Soviet contact read, Peak Echo lives, Patagonia site operational. Frequency perfected, but risks remain. Liora recorded it, her voice urgent. Hans brought the weapon here, tested it in Argentina. Matteo knows more than he's saying. Matteo admitted Hans had built a lab in the mountains, abandoned after his death, but hinted at a modern revival. Some people, scientists, military types, came asking about it last year, he said, his voice tense. They wanted to restart Peak Echo, said it could control crowds. I told them to leave, but they didn't listen. They're out there, near the old lab. Liora recorded his confession, her mind racing. A modern group, weaponizing Peak Echo, possibly tied to the threats she'd faced. Matteo gave her coordinates to the lab site, a 3-hour hike into the Andes, warning her. They'll kill to protect it, don't go alone. Liora recruited a local guide, Javier Morales, a rugged man in his 30s who'd hiked the Andes for years, recommended by Rosa. Javier was skeptical, his dark eyes narrowing as Liora explained Peak Echo. Sounds like a ghost story, he said, but agreed to help, intrigued by her podcast. They hiked to the site, the terrain brutal, the air thinning as they climbed, the forest giving way to rocky slopes. The lab was a crumbling concrete bunker, its entrance hidden by overgrowth, the hum unmistakable, reverberating through the stone. Inside, rusted equipment lined the walls, frequency generators, speakers, notes on infrasound effects. Induces panic, organ failure at high levels. Liora recorded the scene, her voice a whisper. June 19, 2025, for 15 p.m. This is Hans Weber's lab. Peak Echo was here and someone's been back. Javier found fresh boot prints, leading to a hidden room with modern equipment. Laptops, cables, a map of Patagonia marked with test zones, dated 2024. Liora photographed it, her heart racing. Matteo was right, the project had been revived. She uploaded a new episode, The Patagonian Echo, detailing the lab and Matteo's warning, her voice charged. Peak Echo is active again in Argentina, a weapon that killed before, now in new hands. Downloads surged, listeners commenting with fear and support, some mentioning a tech company, AndesTech, linked to military contracts possibly involved. That evening, Liora and Javier returned to the inn, exhausted but triumphant, the evidence secure on her laptop. She reviewed her recordings, the hum from the lab haunting her, a reminder of the Krauses and Dyatlov hikers' fates. As she prepared to sleep, a loud crash echoed from her room's door. She grabbed her recorder, its light on, and peered through the peephole. A man tall in a black coat, his face obscured, holding a crowbar. He smashed the lock, forcing his way in, and Liora screamed, diving behind the bed, her recorder capturing her panic. "He's here, breaking in." The man lunged, grabbing her arm, his grip iron, but Javier burst in, tackling him, the two struggling as Liora scrambled for her bag. The intruder broke free, swinging the crowbar, catching Leora's shoulder with a glancing blow, the pain sharp as she fell, her vision blurring. Javier wrestled him out, the man fleeing into the night, but not before dropping a small device. A frequency emitter, its hum identical to the lab's. Liora recorded through gritted teeth, her shoulder throbbing. June 19, 2025, 11:47 p.m. He attacked me, left a device, part of Peak Echo. They're here in Patagonia, and they'll kill to keep this secret. Javier helped her to the bed, calling the police, but the hum lingered, a chilling clue to the weapon's revival. Leora's injury a stark warning of the danger ahead. Liora Kane sat on the edge of the bed in her Bariloche room, her shoulder throbbing from the glancing blow of the crowbar. The frequency emitter dropped by her attacker, humming faintly on the table. The device's low, unsettling vibration mirrored the hum she'd heard in Hans Weber's abandoned lab in the Patagonian Andes, a chilling reminder of Peak Echo. The sound weapon tied to the 1922 Kraus family massacre in Bavaria and the 1959 Dyatlov Pass deaths in the Ural Mountains. It was June 20, 2025, and the air in San Carlos de Bariloche was crisp, the Andes looming outside her window, their peaks dusted with snow. Her recorder captured her strained voice. June 20, 2025, 12:15 a.m. I was attacked, an intruder, part of whoever's reviving Peak Echo. This device, it's active, and they'll kill to protect it. Javier Morales, her local guide, stood guard at the door, his rugged face etched with concern as he spoke to the police on the phone, his Spanish rapid and tense. The innkeeper, Rosa, brought ice for Leora's shoulder, her hands trembling. "This town has secrets," Rosa whispered, her voice low. "The Weber name brings trouble, always has." Liora nodded, her mind racing. Matteo Weber, Hans's grandson, had confirmed Peak Echo's revival, pointing her to the lab where modern equipment and a 2024 map marked with test zones suggested a new group, possibly AndesTech, a tech company linked to military contracts, according to her podcast listeners, was weaponizing the technology. The attack confirmed she was close, but the cost was rising. At dawn, Liora visited a local clinic, her shoulder bruised but not broken, the pain a dull ache as she moved. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Elena Vargas, wrapped her arm in a sling, her brow furrowing as Liora explained the attack. "Be careful," Elena warned, her voice soft. "Bariloche has a dark side. Outsiders digging into the past often leave in a hurry, or not at all." Liora recorded the warning, her resolve hardening. She'd come too far to stop. She returned to the inn, where Javier waited, his pickup truck ready. "We need more on Peak Echo," she said, her voice firm. "Let's find someone who knew Hans Weber, someone who can explain what this weapon really does." They drove to the Bariloche Historical Society, a small building near the lake, its walls lined with photos of the town's founding families, including the Webers. There, Liora met Sofia Alvarez, a retired scientist in her 70s who'd worked with Hans Weber in the 1960s, before his death in 1970. Sofia's hair was white, her hands steady as she handled a box of Hans's research notes, her eyes sharp with memory. "I heard your podcast," Sophia said, her English accented but clear. "Hans was brilliant but obsessed. Peak Echo was his life's work, a sound weapon using infrasound frequencies to incapacitate, even kill. He developed it with the Germans, then the Soviets, but after the war, he brought it here." Sophia handed Liora a journal, its pages filled with Hans's meticulous notes, diagrams of frequency generators, and test results. Frequency 7 Hz causes panic, 18 Hz disrupts organs. Lethal at sustained exposure. A 1948 entry detailed a test in Patagonia. Subject group, local workers, exposed for 10 minutes. Results, disorientation, internal bleeding, 2 fatalities. Project viable but unstable. Liora recorded the journal, her voice tense. Peak Echo killed the Krauses in 1922. Hans tested it here, killed again, then the Soviets used it on the Dyatlov hikers in 1959. This weapon's a monster. Sophia nodded, her face pale. Hans stopped after 48. Too dangerous, he said. But someone started again. I've heard the hum, near the old lab, last month. Liora and Javier returned to the lab site. A 3-hour hike into the Andes, the terrain more treacherous with her injured shoulder, the sling slowing her down. The bunker's concrete walls were colder today, the hum louder, vibrating through her bones as they explored deeper. They found a hidden chamber, its door recently pried open, containing a modern setup, computers, speakers, a logbook dated 2025. Test 3 frequency stabilized, range extended to 2 kilometers. AndesTech funding confirmed. Liora photographed it, her heart racing. AndesTech was involved, weaponizing peak echo for crowd control, possibly worse. She recorded her discovery. June 20th, 2025, 2:47 p.m. AndesTech is behind this. They've turned peak echo into a modern weapon, and they're testing it here. As they documented the evidence, Javier noticed a faint glow under a table. A tripwire, connected to a small explosive device, rigged to destroy the lab. "Move!" he shouted, grabbing Leora's arm, her shoulder screaming in pain as they dove out the door. The explosion rocked the bunker, debris flying. The hum silenced as the chamber collapsed, smoke billowing into the sky. Liora recorded through coughs, her voice hoarse. They booby-trapped the lab. Someone knew we'd come back. Javier helped her down the trail, their descent frantic, the Andes silence now a stark contrast to the blast, but the danger lingered. Someone was watching, protecting peak echo at all costs. Back in Bariloche, Liora uploaded a new episode, The Patagonian Blast, detailing the lab's destruction and AndesTech's involvement, her voice charged with urgency. Peak echo is alive, funded by AndesTech, tested in Patagonia. It's killed before, and it will again. Downloads soared, listeners commenting with outrage, some sharing AndesTech whistleblower rumors, others warning her to stop. One tip stood out from Mountain Shadow 23. AndesTech's CEO, Victor Salazar, knows everything. Find him in Buenos Aires. Liora shared the tip with Javier, who agreed to drive her back, but a local skeptic, Pablo Gomez, a journalist in his 40s who'd scoffed at her podcast, approached at the inn, his face twisted with disdain. "You're stirring up trouble," Pablo said, his voice sharp. "Weber's just a ghost story. AndesTech is a tech company, not a murderer. You'll ruin this town with your lies." Liora recorded the confrontation, her tone calm but firm. "I've seen the lab, Pablo. Peak echo is real, and it's dangerous. AndesTech is involved, and people deserve the truth." Pablo scoffed, but his eyes flickered with unease, and he left, muttering about outsiders. Liora sensed he knew more. His defensiveness suggested a connection, maybe to AndesTech, a subplot she'd need to explore. That night, Liora reviewed her recordings, the frequency emitter still humming faintly, its purpose unclear but ominous. She researched AndesTech, finding articles on Victor Salazar, a reclusive CEO with ties to military contracts, his company developing non-lethal crowd control tech. Peak echo's perfect cover. She prepared to leave for Buenos Aires, her shoulder aching but her resolve unshaken, when her phone buzzed, an alert from her podcast platform. Her latest episode had been replaced, the audio distorted, a deep voice rasping through static. "Peak echo will silence you, Kane. Stop or be buried with the Krauses." Her recorder captured her gasp. June 20th, 2025, 11:59 p.m. "They've hacked my podcast, broadcasting a threat, using peak echo's frequency. They're coming for me." The hum from the emitter grew louder, the room vibrating, her vision blurring as the sound overwhelmed her, a weapon turned against her in the heart of Patagonia. Liora Kane sat frozen in her Bariloche room, the distorted voice from her hacked podcast episode. "Peak echo will silence you, Kane. Stop or be buried with the Krauses." Echoing through her laptop speakers, the frequency emitter on the table humming louder, its infrasound vibrations blurring her vision and sending waves of nausea through her. It was June 21st, 2025, and the Patagonian night outside was still, the Andes silhouette a dark reminder of the danger she'd uncovered. Her recorder captured her strained voice. June 21st, 2025, 12:03 a.m. "They've hacked my podcast, used peak echo's frequency against me. I can't stay here." She yanked the emitter's plug, the hum ceasing, her head clearing, but the threat lingered, a stark warning from AndesTech or whoever was reviving the deadly sound weapon. Javier Morales burst into the room, his rugged face pale as he heard the distorted audio, his hands clenched. "We need to move," he said, his Spanish clipped with urgency. "They know where you are." Liora nodded, her shoulder still aching from the previous attack, the sling a constant reminder of the crowbar's blow. She packed her bag, the emitter wrapped in a towel, its purpose still unclear but dangerous, a piece of Peak Echo's modern iteration. Rosa, the innkeeper, offered a spare room at her sister's house, a small cabin on Bariloche's outskirts, and Liora accepted, needing a safe base to plan her next move. She recorded her relocation. "I'm moving to a safe house. AndesTech, Victor Salazar, they're behind this. I need more on Peak Echo's origins." At the cabin, Liora reviewed her evidence. Hans Weber's journal from Sofia Alvarez detailed the weapon's history. Developed in 1921 with Karl Kraus, tested in Bavaria, killing the Kraus family when Karl failed to deliver a component. Refined by the Soviets, killing the Dyatlov hikers in 1959, and brought to Patagonia, where Hans tested it again, now revived by AndesTech. A listener tip pointed her back to Russia. Find Yuri Kovalenko's family in Moscow. His sister Nadia knows the truth. Yuri, the Dyatlov survivor who died of exposure after writing about Peak Echo, might have shared more with his family. Liora booked a flight to Moscow, a 22-hour journey with a layover in Sao Paulo, her mind on Nadia Kovalenko, a potential key to the weapon's Soviet phase. She landed in Moscow on June 23rd. The city's summer heat a jarring shift from Patagonia's chill, Red Square bustling with tourists, the Kremlin's spires gleaming under a pale sun. Liora checked into a modest hotel near the Moskva River, its faded wallpaper and creaking floors a stark contrast to Bariloche's charm. She contacted the Russian State Archive, requesting access to Cold War-era military files, but the process was a labyrinth. Forms, fees, and a curt official, Ivan Petrov, a balding man in his 50s with a perpetual scowl, who dismissed her request. "Those files are restricted," Ivan said, his English halting. "Leave it alone." Liora recorded the exchange, her voice tense. June 23, 2025, 2:15 p.m. Bureaucracy's blocking me. Ivan's hiding something, but I'll find Nadia. She tracked Nadia Kovalenko to a small apartment in a Soviet-era block on Moscow's outskirts, the building's gray concrete cracked, laundry flapping on balconies. Nadia, a frail woman in her 80s with silver hair and deep-set eyes, welcomed her cautiously, her hands trembling as she poured tea. "I heard your podcast," Nadia said, her voice soft, her Russian accent thick. "Yuri was my brother. He survived the pass, but not for long. He told me things before he died." Liora recorded, her heart racing as Nadia shared Yuri's story. "He came back frostbitten, delirious, February 1959. He said they heard a hum, felt it in their bones, then panic like their minds weren't their own. He saw lights, military lights, in the snow. They ran, but the sound, it crushed them inside." Nadia handed Liora a box of Yuri's belongings, letters, photos, a small notebook with a final entry. "Peak Echo, Soviet test, Weber's design. They'll use it again." A letter from Yuri to Nadia, dated 1959, revealed more. "They took us to test it, meant to kill us all. I escaped, but they'll find me. Tell no one." Liora recorded the notebook, her voice urgent. Yuri knew Peak Echo was a deliberate test. The Soviets used the hikers as guinea pigs, just like the Krauses in 1922. Nadia nodded, tears in her eyes. Yuri said a scientist was there, Dr. Mikhail Volodin, Hans Weber's contact. Volodin fled to Argentina after the test, afraid of what he'd done. Liora's mind flashed to her grandfather's stories, tales of a hum that killed, whispered in her Buenos Aires childhood, tying her personally to this horror. She recorded her reflection. "My grandfather knew his stories weren't myths. This weapon's haunted my family too." She thanked Nadia, promising to protect her identity, and left, the notebook and letter in her bag. Her next lead clear, Dr. Mikhail Volodin in Argentina, a link between the Soviet tests and Hans Weber's Patagonian work. She returned to her hotel, uploading a new episode, The Survivor's Truth, detailing Yuri's account and Volodin's name, her voice charged. Peak Echo was a Cold War weapon tested on the innocent. It's still out there. Downloads soared, listeners commenting with support, some mentioning Volodin's death in 1980, but a son, Alexei Volodin, lived in Buenos Aires, possibly with answers. That evening, Liora met a local journalist, Elena Sokolova, a listener in her 30s with fiery red hair and a sharp wit, who'd offered to help navigate Moscow's archives. Elena bribed a lower-level archivist, gaining access to restricted files, her boldness a contrast to Liora's caution. The files confirmed Volodin's role, lead scientist on Peak Echo, reporting to Soviet generals, his notes detailing the Dyatlov test. Frequency 18 Hz, lethal exposure. Subjects terminated, project success. Liora recorded the files, her stomach turning, but Elena noticed Ivan Petrov watching from a corner, his scowl deeper, his presence ominous. "He's trouble," Elena whispered, her voice tense. "Let's go." They left the archive, the Moscow dusk settling, streetlights flickering as they walked to Elena's car, a beat-up Lada parked near Gorky Park. Liora recorded their escape. June 23, 2025, 7:32 p.m. Ivan's following us. He knows we got the files. They drove, Elena's hands tight on the wheel, but Ivan trailed in a black sedan, his headlights glaring in the rear view. A chase ensued, Moscow's streets a blur, horns blaring as Elena wove through traffic, Liora's recorder capturing her shouts. "He's gaining, turn left." They lost him near the Bolshoi Theater, pulling into an alley, their breaths ragged. The cities hum a stark contrast to Peak Echo's deadly frequency. Back at the hotel, Liora prepared to fly to Buenos Aires, Alexei Volodin her next target, but her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You can't outrun the echo." She called Elena, who offered to drive her to the airport, but as they approached Elena's car, Liora noticed the brake lines, sliced clean, a deliberate sabotage meant to kill. Her recorder captured her scream. June 23, 2025, 11:47 p.m. "They've cut the brakes. Ivan or AndesTech, they're trying to stop me." Elena called a taxi, her face pale. The Moscow night closing in, the echo of Peak Echo's legacy a deadly shadow over Liora's pursuit. Liora Kane sat in the back of a Moscow taxi, her heart pounding as the driver navigated away from Elena Sokolova's sabotaged Lada. Its brake lines sliced clean, a deadly trap left by Ivan Petrov or someone tied to AndesTech. It was June 24, 2025, and the Moscow night was a blur of neon lights and shadowed alleys, the echo of her near-miss still ringing in her ears. Her recorder captured her shaky voice. June 24, 2025, 12:01 a.m. "They tried to kill me, cut the brakes. Ivan's involved or AndesTech. I'm heading back to Buenos Aires to face this." Elena, her red-haired journalist ally, sat beside her, her face pale, her hands trembling as she called the police, her voice tense. "We need protection. Someone's after her." The taxi dropped them at Sheremetyevo Airport, where Liora booked the next flight to Buenos Aires, a 22-hour journey with a layover in Frankfurt, her mind racing. She'd uncovered Peak Echo's brutal history. Tested on the Kraus family in Bavaria in 1922, refined by Hans Weber and the Soviets to kill the Dyatlov hikers in 1959, and now revived in Patagonia by AndesTech, led by Viktor Salazar. Nadia Kovalenko's brother, Eerie, had confirmed the Soviet test, and Dr. Mikhail Volodin's son, Alexei, in Buenos Aires, might hold the final piece. Liora recorded her plan. "I'm going after Alexei Volodin. His father worked with Weber, and AndesTech's threat is personal now." Elena promised to stay in Moscow, digging into Ivan's ties, but warned, "Watch your back, Liora, they'll strike again." Liora landed in Buenos Aires on June 25th, the city's humid winter air a relief after Moscow's tension, but her shoulder ached from the Bariloche attack, a constant reminder of the danger. She drove to San Carlos de Bariloche, a 12-hour journey through the Patagonian plains, the Andes peaks rising like silent witnesses. At the safe house, a cabin offered by Rosa, the innkeeper, she met Javier Morales, her rugged guide, who'd stayed to protect her. "You're a target," Javier said, his voice low, his dark eyes scanning the forest. "AndesTech knows you're close. Viktor Salazar won't let this go." Liora nodded, recording her arrival. June 26, 2025, 3:19 p.m. Back in Patagonia. Javier's right, they're watching. Time to set a trap. Liora contacted Captain Ana Torres, a sharp Argentine police officer in her 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor, who'd assisted with the lab investigation. Ana agreed to a sting operation, using Liora's podcast to lure AndesTech operatives. Liora recorded a new episode, the Patagonian trap, announcing a live recording near the abandoned lab site on June 27th, hinting at new evidence on Peak Echo. Join me at 7 p.m. to expose the truth. Victor Salazar, your days are numbered. Downloads spiked, listeners buzzing with excitement, some warning of danger, others offering tips on AndesTech's movements. Anna's team set up surveillance, hidden cameras, undercover officers, and a decoy stage, while Liora wore a wire, her recorder ready. The stakeout day arrived, the air crisp as Liora and Javier hiked to the lab site, now a rubble-strewn crater from the explosion, the Andes' silence heavy with anticipation. Anna's team blended into the forest, their radios crackling, as Liora stood on the decoy stage, her voice amplified. This is Liora Kane, live at the Peak Echo Lab. Victor Salazar, AndesTech, you trafficked this weapon across borders, killed the Krauses, the Dyatlov hikers. Show yourself. The words were a dare, her eyes scanning the trees. A figure emerged, tall, in a black coat, his face obscured by a hood, matching the intruder from Bariloche. Anna signaled, and officers closed in, tackling the man, his struggle fierce as they cuffed him, a frequency emitter falling from his pocket. At the station, the suspect, identified as Raul Mendoza, an AndesTech security operative in his 30s, refused to talk, his silence a wall. Liora recorded the interrogation, her voice tense. June 27, 2025, 8:15 p.m. We've got Raul, AndesTech's man, but he won't break. Anna pressed, revealing evidence from the lab, modern equipment, the 2024 test zones, until Raul cracked. Salazar ordered the revival, he said, his voice low. Peak echoes for crowd control, military contracts, billions. The leaders above him, though, someone from the old days, Volodin's contact. He escaped when you blew the lab. Liora's pulse quickened. Alexei Volodin's father, Mikhail, had a partner still alive pulling strings. Back at the cabin, Liora uploaded an update, the stakeout catch, detailing Raul's confession, her voice charged with hope. But a subplot emerged. Pablo Gomez, the skeptical journalist from Bariloche, approached Javier at the station, whispering urgently, his face tense. I didn't know it'd go this far, Pablo said, his voice breaking. I tipped AndesTech about Liora. They paid me to slow her down. I'm out now, but they'll come for me. Javier recorded it, his trust in Pablo shattered, and confronted Liora. He betrayed us. AndesTech has been one step ahead because of him. Liora's anger flared, her recorder capturing her resolve. We'll use him, turn him against them. The next day, Liora, Javier, and Anna planned a new trap, using Pablo as bait to lure the leader. They hiked to the Kraus land, a remote plot near the lab site, its history tied to Hans Weber's tests, the hum still faint in the air. Liora recorded a flashback, her grandfather's voice, recounting a Bavarian farmstead's silence, the hum that killed, linking her to Karl Kraus's fate. The stakeout was tense, officers hidden, Pablo wired, his guilt palpable as he waited. A child's voice suddenly pierced the silence, a faint cry from the trees. Run, Liora, they're coming. Liora froze, her recorder capturing the sound, her heart racing. No child was supposed to be there. Anna signaled, but the cry stopped, replaced by rustling leaves, a shadow fleeing into the forest. The team searched, finding no child, but a note pinned to a tree. Peak Echo will find you, leave now. Liora recorded it, her voice a whisper. June 28, 2025, 6:47 p.m. A child's voice warned me, someone's playing games, or it's the weapon's effect. They're close. Pablo paled, admitting AndesTech used infrasound to disorient, the cry a hallucination induced by the hum. Before they could react, an explosion rocked the site, a small blast near the lab ruins, smoke billowing as officers scrambled, Liora and Javier diving for cover, the threat escalating beyond their control. Liora Kane dove behind a boulder as the explosion tore through the Patagonian forest near the Kraus land, the blast's heat searing her face, debris raining down as smoke billowed into the gray sky. It was June 28, 2025, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of burnt earth, the Andes peaks looming over the chaos. Her recorder, still in her hand, captured her ragged breaths. June 28, 2025, 6:50 p.m. An explosion near the lab ruins. They're trying to stop us. Javier Morales shielded her, his rugged frame tense as he scanned the trees, while Captain Ana Torres shouted orders to her team, their radios crackling with urgency. The child's cry, "Run, Liora, they're coming," still echoed in her mind, a hallucination induced by peak echo's infrasound, according to Pablo Gomez, the local journalist who'd betrayed her to AndesTech but now sought redemption. Officers fanned out, searching for the source, but the forest was silent, the hum of peak echo gone, replaced by the crackle of smoldering debris. Leora's shoulder ached from her earlier injury, the sling a hindrance as she scrambled to her feet, her heart racing. Anna approached, her face grim, her uniform dusted with ash. "No one's hurt, but that was a warning," Anna said, her voice sharp. "They're targeting the site, trying to destroy evidence." Liora nodded, recording the aftermath. "This is Peak Echo's work. AndesTech or someone higher doesn't want us here. But we've got Raul Mendoza, he'll talk." Raul, the AndesTech operative they'd captured in the stakeout, was their best lead to the network's leader, a figure tied to Mikhail Volodin, the Soviet scientist who'd worked with Hans Weber. Back at the Bariloche police station, Liora sat in on Raul's interrogation, her recorder running, her eyes locked on the man. Raul, in his 30s, sat cuffed, his black coat confiscated, his face pale but defiant, his jaw clenched. Anna leaned in, her tone unyielding. "You said Victor Salazar ordered Peak Echo's revival, but there's someone above him. Who is it? Where are they?" Raul's eyes flickered, his hands trembling, but he stayed silent, the weight of his choices heavy. Liora spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Raul, you've seen what Peak Echo does. It killed the Krauses in 1922, the Dyatlov hikers in 1959, and now AndesTech is using it to kill again. Help us stop it." Raul's resolve cracked, his voice a whisper. "It's not just AndesTech, it's bigger, global. The leader. He's old, from the Soviet days. Calls himself Echo One. He worked with Volodin, funded Weber's experiments. He's here in Patagonia, hiding near Lago Puello." Liora recorded his confession, her pulse quickening. Echo One, a Soviet relic, pulling strings since 1922, now in Patagonia. "We're close," Raul continued, his voice shaky. "They're weaponizing the Kraus land. There's a bunker hidden where they're testing Peak Echo for a global buyer. Military contracts, China, maybe others. Salazar's just a front." Anna pressed for the bunker's location, and Raul gave coordinates. A remote spot 10 kilometers from the lab ruins, buried under the Andes foothills. Liora uploaded a new episode, the Echo One reveal, detailing Raul's confession and the bunker lead, her voice charged. "Peak Echo's network is global. Echo One's been killing for decades, and he's here. We're going after him." Downloads soared, listeners commenting with shock, some offering AndesTech whistleblower contacts, others warning of danger. Liora and Anna planned a raid on the bunker, but first, she returned to the Kraus land with Javier to investigate its history, the explosion site now cordoned off. The plot, a hectare of rocky terrain near the lab, had been owned by Hans Weber after Karl Kraus's death, a purchase shrouded in mystery. Liora recorded a historical dive, her voice soft. June 29, 2025, 10:32 a.m. The Kraus land. Weber bought it in 1923, after the massacre. Why? To hide something or test Peak Echo here. She found a local elder, Don Miguel, a wiry man in his 80s with a weathered face, who remembered Weber's arrival. "He came with machines," Miguel said, his Spanish slow, his eyes distant. "Built something underground, said it was for science, but we heard screams, then silence. The hum, it never left." Miguel's story triggered a flashback for Liora, her grandfather's voice, recounting a Bavarian farmstead's eerie quiet, the hum that killed, a memory that tied her to this land across generations. She recorded her reflection. "My grandfather knew this horror. I'm finishing his story for the Krauses, for the hikers." Don Miguel pointed to a hidden trail, leading to a stone marker, its surface etched with the same symbol she'd seen in Russia, a triangle with a circle inside. Beneath it, a rusted hatch, locked, but fresh tire tracks nearby suggested recent activity. Liora photographed it, her heart racing. The bunker Raul mentioned, a hub for Peak Echo's revival. Back in Bariloche, Liora met Pablo Gomez, the journalist who'd betrayed her to AndesTech, but now sought atonement. Pablo, his face haggard, handed her a USB drive, his voice low. "I got this from an AndesTech insider. Meeting logs, dates, buyers. Echo One's meeting someone tonight, at the bunker. I'm sorry, Liora. I didn't know they'd try to kill you." Liora recorded the exchange, her anger tempered by his remorse. Pablo's turned. He's risking his life to help. We'll use this. The logs confirmed a meeting at 8 p.m. A Chinese buyer named Li Wei, negotiating Peak Echo's sale for urban control, billions at stake. Anna assembled a task force, 10 officers armed, ready to raid the bunker that evening. Liora joined as an observer, her wire transmitting to Anna, her recorder capturing every moment. The hike to the bunker was grueling, the Andes' darkness oppressive, the hum growing louder as they approached the hatch, its lock pried open. Inside, a concrete tunnel led to a chamber, modern equipment hummed, frequency generators active, a laptop displaying test results. Frequency 20 Hz, lethal range 3 kilometers, ready for deployment. Liora recorded the scene, her voice a whisper. June 29, 2025, 7:45 p.m. This is Peak Echo's heart. They're selling death right now. Echo 1. A gaunt man in his 80s with a scarred face and cold gray eyes, stood with Li Wei, a sharp-dressed man in his 50s, their voices low as they finalized the deal. Anna signaled, and officers stormed in shouting, "Hands up! You're under arrest!" Echo 1 moved fast, pulling a detonator, his voice a snarl. "You'll never stop the Echo." Li Wei surrendered, but Echo 1 triggered the device, a deafening explosion rocking the bunker. The ceiling collapsing as Liora and Javier dove for cover, Anna's team scrambling to escape. Liora's recorder captured her scream. "The bunker's collapsing. We're trapped." Rocks fell, dust choking the air, her vision fading as the hum of Peak Echo mingled with the chaos, a deadly trap closing in. Liora Kane coughed through the choking dust as the bunker ceiling collapsed around her. The explosion triggered by Echo 1 reverberating through the underground chamber in the Patagonian Andes. It was June 29, 2025, and the hum of Peak Echo's equipment was drowned by the rumble of falling rock, the air thick with debris. Her recorder, still clutched in her hand, captured her desperate gasps. June 29, 2025, 8:03 p.m. The bunker's collapsing. Echo 1 set off a bomb. "We're trapped." Javier Morales, her rugged guide, shielded her with his body, his voice strained as he shouted, "Stay low, Liora." Captain Ana Torres's officers scrambled, pulling their prisoner, Li Wei, the Chinese buyer, to safety, but Echo 1 had vanished in the chaos, his scarred silhouette disappearing down a side tunnel. A slab of concrete pinned Liora's leg, the pain sharp as she struggled, her shoulder, already injured from a previous attack, screaming in protest. Javier grunted, lifting the slab just enough for her to crawl free, her sling torn, her leg bruised but not broken. Anna's team cleared a path, their flashlights cutting through the dust, and they emerged into the Patagonian night, the Andes peaks looming under a starlit sky, the hum silenced by the bunker's destruction. Liora recorded the aftermath, her voice hoarse. "We're out, barely. Echo 1 escaped, but we've got Li Wei. This isn't over." Anna, her face smudged with dirt, confirmed Echo 1's escape route, a hidden exit leading to the forest, but Li Wei's arrest gave them leverage, his fear of extradition a bargaining chip. Back at the Bariloche police station, Liora sat in on Li Wei's interrogation, her recorder running, her body aching but her resolve unshaken. Li Wei, a sharp-dressed man in his 50s, sat cuffed, his composure cracked, his voice low as Anna pressed him. "Who is Echo 1? Where's he going?" Li Wei's eyes darted, his hands trembling, and he finally spoke, his English accented but clear. "His name is Sergei Volkov, ex-KGB, worked with Mikhail Volodin on Peak Echo in the 50s. He's been running this since Weber died, selling to whoever pays. He's obsessed, says the weapon's his legacy. He's gone to Buenos Aires to meet Alexei Volodin, Mikhail's son. They're planning a final sale bigger than me." Liora recorded his confession, her pulse quickening. "Sergei Volkov, Echo 1, ex-KGB, in Buenos Aires with Alexei. We're closing in." Liora uploaded a new episode, The Bunker Collapse, detailing the raid and Sergei's identity, her voice charged with urgency. "Peak Echo's mastermind is Sergei Volkov. He's been killing since 1959, and he's not done. I'm heading to Buenos Aires." Downloads soared, listeners commenting with shock, some sharing tips on Alexei Volodin's location. A tech consultant in Palermo, a trendy Buenos Aires neighborhood. But Liora had another lead to pursue first, the Kraus descendants. Raul Mendoza, the AndesTech operative they'd captured, had mentioned the Kraus land as a testing site, suggesting Hans Weber had targeted the family to eliminate witnesses. Liora needed to know if any Krauses survived, their testimony crucial to exposing Peak Echo's origins. She drove to Lago Puello, a 2-hour journey from Bariloche, the turquoise lake shimmering under the morning sun, the Andes peaks a stark reminder of the bunker's collapse. There, she met Clara Fisher, a genealogist in her 60s with kind eyes and a soft voice, who'd traced the Kraus family after hearing Liora's podcast. Clara welcomed her into a cozy office, its walls lined with family trees, her hands steady as she opened a file. "I found them," Clara said, her Spanish warm. Carl and Greta Kraus had a 5th child, Anna, 2 years old in 1922. She was with a neighbor the night of the massacre, survived, was adopted by a Bavarian family, the Fischers. Her descendants live here, in Patagonia. Hans Weber never knew. Clara introduced Liora to Anna's great-granddaughter, Sophia Fischer, a teacher in her 30s with dark hair and a gentle smile, who lived in a nearby village. Sophia invited Liora to her home, a small house with a garden overlooking the lake, her 2 children playing nearby. "I heard your podcast," Sophia said, her voice soft. "My great-great-grandmother Anna left a diary. She wrote about her parents, the farm, a man named Weber who visited, always asking about a project. She heard screams one night, then nothing. The neighbor took her in after the bodies were found." Sophia handed Liora the diary, its pages brittle, a 1923 entry chilling. "Weber came again, said I'd be safe if I stayed quiet. I hear the hum sometimes, in my dreams." Liora recorded the diary, her voice trembling. June 30th, 2025, 2:47 p.m. Anna Kraus survived. Sophia's her legacy, proof Weber killed to silence the family but missed one. This ties Peak Echo to the Kraus's blood. Sophia agreed to testify, her courage a beacon, but her eyes held fear. "If they're still out there, using this weapon, my children aren't safe." Liora promised protection, Anna arranging a police detail, but the weight of Sophia's words lingered. Peak Echo's shadow stretched across generations, a legacy of death. Back in Bariloche, Liora dug into Cold War archives online, accessing declassified files with help from Elena Sokolova, her Moscow contact, who'd uncovered more on Sergei Volkov. The files detailed Sergei's role, KGB operative, oversaw Peak Echo's 1959 test, worked with Hans Weber to refine the weapon, then went underground after the Soviet collapse, funding AndesTech through shell companies. Liora recorded the findings, her mind on Alexei Volodin, who might know Sergei's endgame. A subplot emerged. A whistleblower, Maria Lopez, an AndesTech engineer in her 40s, contacted Liora via email, her message cryptic. "I worked on Peak Echo. Meet me in Buenos Aires before they find me." Liora recorded the tip, her voice tense. "Maria's a risk. She's inside AndesTech, knows their plans. I need her." Liora drove to Buenos Aires, the 12-hour journey exhausting, her injuries slowing her, but her determination fierce. She met Maria in a Palermo cafe, its walls lined with art, the air thick with coffee and cigarette smoke. Maria, her face pale, her hands fidgeting, spoke in a whisper. "Peak Echo's ready. They're selling it to a private army in the Middle East, a final deal. Sergei's meeting Alexei tomorrow, at a warehouse in La Boca. But they know I talked, I'm running." Liora recorded her warning, her heart racing, but as they left, a black SUV trailed them, its windows tinted, its presence ominous. Maria panicked, bolting into the crowd, leaving Liora alone, her recorder capturing her fear. "They're following, Maria's gone, but I've got the location." That night, at her Buenos Aires hotel, Liora prepared for the warehouse raid with Anna, who'd flown in with a task force, her team coordinating with local police. She reviewed her recordings, Sophia's diary haunting her, a reminder of the Kraus's loss, her grandfather's stories echoing in her mind. Tales of a hum that killed, a legacy she was unraveling. As she locked her door, a shadow passed her window, a figure tall, his face obscured, whispering her name. "Liora, the echo sees you." Her recorder captured her scream. June 30th, 2025, 11:59 p.m. "He's here, outside my window watching me." The figure vanished, the night swallowing him, but his whisper lingered, a chilling promise of Peak Echo's wrath. Liora Kane stood frozen in her Buenos Aires hotel room, the whisper of her name. Liora, the echo sees you. Still echoing in her ears, the shadowy figure outside her window vanishing into the night. It was July 1st, 2025, and the humid air pressed against the glass. The city's distant hum a stark contrast to the chilling promise of peak echo's wrath. Her recorder captured her ragged breath. July 1st, 2025, 12:05 a.m. Someone was outside, watching me, calling my name. Sergei Volkov, Echo 1, is close, and I'm walking into his trap. Her heart raced. The encounter a stark reminder of the danger she'd faced. From the Kraus massacre in Bavaria to the Dyatlov Pass deaths, now culminating in Patagonia's revival by AndesTech. Captain Ana Torres, her Argentine ally, had flown in with a task force, and Maria Lopez, the AndesTech whistleblower, had given her the warehouse location in La Boca, where Sergei and Alexei Volodin planned their final sale. Liora reviewed her evidence, the weight of her journey pressing down. Sophia Fischer, Anna Kraus's great-granddaughter, had shared the diary proving Hans Weber's role in the 1922 massacre, a weapon test gone wrong. Yuri Kovalenko's notebook from Dyatlov Pass confirmed the 1959 Soviet test, and Raul Mendoza's confession tied Sergei Volkov, ex-KGB, to the modern revival, with Alexei Mikhail Volodin's son as his partner. Liora recorded her resolve. Sergei's been behind this since the Cold War. Peak echoes his legacy, and I'm ending it. She uploaded a teaser, the Buenos Aires showdown, hinting at a live reveal, her voice charged. Tomorrow, I confront the men who've killed with sound. I need your support. Downloads surged, listeners commenting with anticipation, some warning of betrayal, others offering prayers. Anna assembled the task force, 15 officers armed, coordinated with Buenos Aires police. Planning a raid on the warehouse at 8 p.m., the time Maria had specified for the sale to a Middle Eastern private army. Liora joined as an observer, her wire transmitting to Anna, her recorder capturing every moment. The drive to La Boca, a vibrant district of colorful houses and tango music, took an hour. The warehouse, a dilapidated building by the Riachuelo River, its rusted doors a stark contrast to the festive streets. Liora recorded the approach. July 1st, 2025, 7:15 p.m. We're at the warehouse. Sergei and Alexei are inside, selling peak echo. This ends tonight. The team breached the warehouse, officers shouting, "Hands up!" Sergei Volkov, a gaunt man in his 80s with a scarred face and cold gray eyes, stood near a table of frequency generators. Alexei Volodin, a stocky man in his 50s with slick-back hair, beside him. A Middle Eastern buyer, Hassan al-Masri, in his 40s, stepped back, hands raised, but Sergei grabbed a detonator, his voice a snarl. "You'll die with your evidence, Kane." Alexei lunged for a laptop, trying to erase data, as officers tackled Hassan, cuffing him. Liora recorded the chaos, her voice urgent. Sergei's got a detonator. Alexei's destroying files. Anna fired a warning shot, forcing Sergei to drop the device, but he drew a pistol, firing wildly, bullets ricocheting off metal walls. Officers returned fire, hitting Alexei's leg, his scream echoing as he fell, but Sergei escaped through a side door, his agility surprising for his age. Liora pursued, her recorder running, her shoulder and leg protesting as she stumbled after him, the warehouse's shadows swallowing his form. Outside, the Riachuelo's murky water gleamed under streetlights, and Sergei vanished into a maze of alleys, his laughter a chilling echo. Liora recorded her frustration. "He's gone, Sergei's too fast, but we've got Alexei and Hassan." Back inside, Anna interrogated Alexei, his face pale, his leg bleeding as medics worked. "Why revive peak echo?" Anna demanded. Alexei's voice was weak, his eyes defiant. "My father started it. Mikhail knew its power. Sergei convinced me, billions from private armies, control of cities. We tested it in Patagonia, planned global deployment." Liora recorded his confession, her mind on Sophia Fischer's children, the Kraus legacy at stake. Alexei added, "Sergei's not alone. There's a double agent in your team, feeding him our moves. He'll strike again." Liora's blood ran cold. A traitor explaining the sabotage and attacks. Anna's team searched the warehouse, finding a laptop with encrypted files, test logs, fire lists, a blueprint for a portable peak echo device. Its range extended to 5 kilometers, lethal at 20 hertz. Liora photographed it, her voice tense. "This is their endgame, peak echo as a weapon of mass control sold worldwide." A subplot emerged. Pablo Gomez, the redeemed journalist, approached Ana, his face haggard, admitting he'd overheard a call. The double agent's Carlos Rivera, your Buenos Aires contact. He tipped Sergei about the raid. Ana's jaw tightened, confirming Carlos's absence, his radio silent, a betrayal cutting deep. Liora reflected on her journey, her grandfather's stories of a hum that killed, tying her to Kraus's fate, fueling her resolve. She uploaded an update, the warehouse fight, detailing Alexei's confession and Carlos's betrayal, her voice resolute. That night, at the hotel, Liora prepared for the next move, her recorder on, when a gunshot rang out from the street below, the sound sharp against the city's hum. She rushed to the window, her recorder capturing her gasp. July 1st, 2025, 11:59 p.m. A gunshot, someone's down outside. She saw a body slump, Carlos Rivera, blood pooling on the pavement, a figure in black fleeing into the night, Sergei or his ally, silencing the traitor. The shot echoed, a final warning, Liora's mission far from over. Liora Kane stood at her Buenos Aires hotel window, the gunshots echo fading into the night, Carlos Rivera's lifeless body slumped on the pavement below, blood pooling under the streetlights. It was July 2nd, 2025, and the humid air pressed against the glass, the city's distant hum a stark contrast to the chilling silence left by Sergei Volkov's, or his allies' departure. Her recorder captured her shaky voice. July 2nd, 2025, 12:05 a.m. Carlos is dead, shot outside my window, likely by Sergei or someone he controls. The traitor's gone, but the threat remains. Her heart pounded, the image of the fleeing figure in black seared into her mind. A reminder that Peak Echo's legacy, traced from the 1922 Kraus massacre in Bavaria to the 1959 Dyatlov Pass deaths, now revived by AndesTech, was far from extinguished. Captain Ana Torres burst into the room, her face grim, her team securing the scene as police sirens wailed below. Ana confirmed Carlos's death, a single bullet to the chest, the killer's precision suggesting Sergei's hand, or a hired gun. He's tying up loose ends, Ana said, her voice tense. Alexei Volodin's in custody, Hassan Almasri's talking, but Sergei's still out there. Liora nodded, recording the update. Sergei escaped, ex-KGB, Echo 1, the mastermind behind Peak Echo's revival. We've got his network on the ropes, but he's not done. The warehouse raid had yielded a laptop with encrypted files, test logs, fire lists, a blueprint for a portable Peak Echo device with a 5-kilometer lethal range at 20 Hz. Evidence of a global conspiracy. Liora uploaded a new episode, The Traitor's Fall, detailing Carlos's murder and the raid's haul, her voice resolute. Sergei Volkov is running, but we're dismantling his weapon. Help me find him. Downloads soared past 150,000. Listeners commenting with support, some sharing Sergei sightings in Patagonia, others warning of his reach. Liora flew to San Carlos de Bariloche, a 2-hour flight to tie up loose ends, her injuries, shoulder and leg, aching but her determination fierce. She met Sophia Fisher, Anna Kraus's great-granddaughter, at her village home, the garden alive with children's laughter, a stark contrast to the violence she'd faced. Sophia hugged her, tears in her eyes, her diary in hand. You've given us closure, Sophia said, her voice soft. Anna's story, her parents' deaths, Weber's hum, it's no longer a ghost tale. We can heal now. Liora recorded the moment, her voice warm. July 3rd, 2025, 10:32 a.m. Sophia's testimony closes the Kraus case. Peak Echo took her family, but she survived. This is for them. Sophia agreed to testify internationally, her children safe under police protection, their resilience a beacon against the weapon's darkness. Liora visited the Kraus land, the bunker site now a smoldering ruin, its hatch sealed by the explosion. Don Miguel, the local elder, joined her, his weathered face reflecting the land's history. Weber's hum killed here, Miguel said, his Spanish slow. But you've stopped it for now. Liora recorded his words, her mind flashing to her grandfather's stories. Tales of a Bavarian farmstead's silence, the hum that haunted her childhood in Buenos Aires, tying her personally to this fight. She reflected, this land's blood is my blood, Karl Kraus's loss drove me, and I've honored him. The site's silence was a victory, but the hum's echo lingered, a haunting reminder of Peak Echo's reach. Back in Buenos Aires, Liora joined a global task force, Interpol, Argentine police, and Russian officials formed to dismantle Peak Echo's network. Anna led the effort, coordinating with Elena Sokolova in Moscow, who'd uncovered Sergei's shell companies, and Javier Morales, who tracked AndesTech assets. The laptop files revealed buyers: China, Brazil, a Middle Eastern militia, planning urban control, their arrests underway. Liora recorded the formation. July 4, 2025, 2:15 p.m. We're building a coalition. Peak Echo's global threat ends here, but Sergei's still free. Alexei Volodin, recovering from his leg wound, gave up more under pressure. Sergei's hideout, a remote estancia near Ushuaia, Patagonia's southern tip, a 3-hour flight south. Liora and Anna flew to Ushuaia, the rugged landscape a stark contrast to Buenos Aires' bustle, the Beagle Channel's icy waters gleaming under a gray sky. They raided the estancia with a task force, finding abandoned equipment, frequency generators, a map marked with test sites. But Sergei was gone, his trail cold, a note left on a table. "The echo lives beyond me, Kane. You'll hear it again." Liora recorded the find, her voice tense. "He's escaped, left a taunt, but we've seized his gear. This isn't over." The task force dismantled the devices, their hum silenced, a partial victory, but Sergei's words chilled her. That evening, Liora met Sophia Fisher, who'd flown in to testify, her presence a symbol of resilience. They shared a meal, Sophia's children laughing, a moment of peace after months of terror. Liora recorded her closure. "Sophia's family survived, Anna's legacy lives, and I've kept my promise to my grandfather." But as she walked back to her hotel, a faint hum vibrated through the street, subtle but familiar, sending a shiver down her spine. She turned, her recorder on, and saw a figure in the distance, tall, scarred, his face obscured. Watching her from a rooftop, the triangle with circle symbol etched into a nearby wall. Her voice broke. July 5, 2025, 11:59 p.m. "He's here, Sergei, or someone like him. The hum's back, and I'm not safe." The figure vanished, the hum fading, but Leora's resolve hardened. She uploaded a final episode, Echoes of Victory, detailing the task force's work and Sergei's escape, her voice steady. Peak Echo's network is broken, the Kraus is avenged, but the shadow lingers. "I'll keep fighting, for every lost voice, for my grandfather." This is Liora Kane, signing off but never stopping. She locked her hotel door, the security light glowing, her eyes on the night, the hum a distant echo, a podcaster who'd faced the darkness and survived, her mission unending, the peak's silence a haunting call to action.